All right, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, inshallah, we are continuing. And let's see right there, just making sure that what I'm seeing is what you're seeing. So, let's do this. Just making sure. Okay, so we were talking about earlier what a person in a state of a major impurity is not allowed to do. And we went in details and talked about touching the Quran. And we said that he was basically quoting, and I guess he definitely supports the opinion that the preponderant ruling is that you cannot touch the Quran in a state of a major impurity, and meaning if a woman is on her period or postpartum, or a man or a woman is in a state of janaba, which is post-sexual, I guess the climax of it, then in that situation that they cannot touch the Quran. So he was basically, I guess, supporting that opinion, but I also wanted to say, well, to claim that there was a unanimous agreement is not necessarily accurate, even though he had quoted Ibn Abd al-Barr, but we don't really, and that's why he said ashbah bil mutawatir, so it's not necessarily something that there was a unanimous agreement on. So just to mention that one, and even the ahadith la yamassul Qur'ana illa tahir. So Ibn Hazm basically said, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not supposed to be touching the Quran, because al-mu'min la yanjus, a believer does not become impure, and regarded that, well, the disbelievers were coming into the masjid and making their shahada, or coming into the masjid to inquire, ask questions, or perhaps even make political agreements. So the masjid was actually at the time considered an open premise in order to discuss different government issues, different agreements, political agreements, whatever it is, and they would be coming into the masjid, even though the masjid was more of a designated area for prayer, but they were still coming in. And certainly you had different scrolls that were sent by the Prophet ﷺ, and it contained Quran, like the one that was sent to Caesar, or like the one that was sent to the different kings all over the world, or at least within the Arabian Peninsula, and also Egypt, and let's say in Persia, and they were not Muslim, but they still held these manuscripts that contained Quran. Okay, so that was the evidence that Ibn Hazm had supported, and it's a considerable opinion. Okay, let's see the other part. He said, يحرم على المحدث الصلاة فرضا أو نفلا. He said it is impermissible for a person in a state of impurity to pray, whether we're speaking about fard or nafil. Whether we're talking about fard, an obligatory prayer, or a non-obligatory prayer, it would be impermissible to pray in a state of impurity. And he said, وَهَذَا بِإِجْمَاعُ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ. He said all scholars would agree, and all scholars unanimously agreed, that offering prayer, whether obligatory or voluntary prayers, that it's not permissible for somebody to pray during their, of course, state of ritual impurity. So what's the evidence on that? Not that one, I would agree that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ وَإِن كُنتُمْ جُنُبًا فَطَهَّرُوا. So the ayah was basically saying, oh, you who believe, sorry about that, so the ayah says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, or you who believed, when you rise to perform prayer, wash your faces and your forearms to the elbows, and wipe over your heads, and wash your feet to the ankles. And if you're in a state of janaba, then purify yourselves. Okay. And in other words, of course, this ayah is straightforward, that if you want to perform prayer, that you basically have to do major and minor cleansing from those impurities. And let's look at that hadith and see, do they really help us and support that interpretation. لا يقبل الله صلاة بغير طهور. The Prophet ﷺ had said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's say this hadith, is it authentic? It is. It was narrated by Muslim. Okay, let's see at the bottom right there. Said it was narrated by Muslim and the Bukhari. And you got in Muslim, he actually had a couple narrations right there. So let's see. He said that, quote, Allah does not accept the prayer of any one of you if he passes wind or urine or stool until he performs ablution. That hadith would be the translation of this one. Okay, let's see the other. Allah does not accept a prayer without purification. This one is the translation for this one. Okay, let's see this hadith right there. Let's look at the reference for it. The reference for it is narrated by Tirmidhi, and it was sorry about that. Okay. The other thing that one cannot do, hold on, do all scholars actually consider, let's see, whether the person was unaware or whether the person was aware, forgetting, or whether it was on purpose, that they could not actually pray without wudu or removing the major and minor impurity. So what if they do? Is that considered as haram? Or, well, I'm just doing a state of dhikr, and okay, I've got some impurity, but does that make it haram for me to do? What's the ruling on that? So yes, it is haram to pray with a major or a minor impurity. Why is it haram? I'm just standing to pray. Okay, I don't have the actual thing, but I'm just basically doing the dhikr of it, the movement of it. Why would it be haram? Because in general, if the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يقبل صلاة طهور, and in fact, there are a hadith that said that the person is held accountable for praying without tahara, without purification. So can I just consider that? Well, I didn't want everyone to know that I had my period, so I just joined along with everyone and pretended to pray. Is that permissible? The answer is no, that's not permissible. Just step on a side. It's not permissible. Well, I mean, didn't want to embarrass myself. Why is it embarrassing, dear? It's not embarrassing. Just step on a side. Just step on a side, and can I just stand and once they're not praying could just pull back? Yes, you can. That's permissible. Okay. And وإن كان جاهلا أو ناسيا فإنه لا يأثم. I didn't know all of this. And am I still held accountable? Like, what do I have to do now? Am I supposed to be like feeding 10 people or anything? No. If you were ignorant about the ruling or you had forgotten, then in that situation, you would not be held accountable. And the prayer that you had prayed is actually not a valid prayer. Okay. Got it up to there. Okay. There's a lot more hadith to discuss this, but remember, we're trying to make it short. Let's see. يحرم على المحدث الطواف بالبيت. That is impermissible for a person in a state of impurity to go circumambulating around the Kaaba. Okay. What's the evidence? The Prophet ﷺ said, الطواف بالبيت صلاة إلا أن الله أباح فيه الكلام. He said, let's see, tawaf is a prayer. The difference is that Allah made it lawful to speak during it. Okay, let's see. the Prophet ﷺ, he made wudu before doing that tawaf. And it was mentioned in a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ had prohibited the woman that is menstruating from doing tawaf until she would be pure from it. So what happens? So what if a woman wanted to go for Hajj and she got her period? First of all, is she permitted to take those well, they're contraceptive pills, but they can prevent a woman from getting her period. Is it permissible? It's permissible. Is it recommended Islamically? No, it's not recommended Islamically. So is it recommended if I'm recommending it for myself, just so that I would, hey, I'm paying a lot of money to go for Hajj and it's once a lifetime, and I really want to, perform all the rituals without anything obstructing me, etc. It's permissible to do that. But do you have to do that? The answer is Islamically, no. But if you want to do that as a personal preference, it's permissible. But definitely first check with your doctor. Many girls actually start taking these pills at the wrong time, thinking that, well, she's going to be getting her period like in a couple days. In a couple days, she starts taking it a week before or something, and that's not actually how it's done. So definitely check with your OB. I'm not going to take that responsibility to tell you and instruct you on how to do it. Okay. But in general, that it's very common that girls would call me that they started taking those pills a week before or a couple days before, and then she would start bleeding and thinking, well, it's probably not my period because I'm on pills. It's like, no, because in order for that medication to start taking, and in fact, it actually takes longer than just a couple days. Okay. Anyhow, is she permitted? She is. But wait a minute, there's another question. What if she was going on Hajj and she knew that, well, she miscalculated, and when she went to the miqat, she basically thought, I don't need to do the miqat and the ihram during the miqat because I'm going to be getting my period, so might as well not even go through the miqat, and I'll just do it in the Masjid al-Tan'im. That's absolutely wrong. So what am I supposed to be doing? What you're supposed to be doing, you're going to perform everything normally. Let's see what you're going to do. You're going to basically start off from the time of al-miqat itself, and with al-miqat, during al-miqat, at the al-miqat, you're basically going to say Allahumma or labbaika, let's say Umrah or Hajj, all right? And then that your ihram would be mahilli haythu habastani. Wait, can you say that again? Sure, I'm gonna write that down for you. محلي حيث حبستني. So what does that mean anyways? محلي حيث حبستني means wherever I'm not capable of continuing my ihram, that would be, if it's beyond my ability to continue, that would be my place of basically the free from ihram. Okay, so wait a minute. What does she do? Does she actually perform the different stations? Yes. So what she would do is, one, she would start with the ihram. She can do istighfar and differences of opinions on reading Quran and so forth. Okay. And she could basically do the dhikr with everyone else. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, all of that. That's completely permissible to do. Yet when she's going to do that tawaf, she doesn't do tawaf. Does she do the sa'i, which is going between Safa and Marwa? Yes, she does. Does she do the tawaf? No, she doesn't do the tawaf. But wait a minute. If she doesn't do tawaf, because of the evidences that you had mentioned, And another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ actually told the Sayyida Aisha, افعلي ما يفعله الحاج غير ألا تطوفي بالبيت. He told her, do what a person during Hajj does, but don't do that circumambulation around the Kaaba. That would mean she would never do it. But wait a minute. I thought it was a pillar to do tawaf at least once for Hajj or Umrah. Okay, but here's a dilemma right there. All the people that are coming with me, like the group, they're actually going to be leaving, which would mean that there would be a pillar that I would never be capable of performing because the period doesn't end till, I don't know, February 10th, and the group is leaving on February 8th. And I cannot extend my stay. The visa ends, at that time. What am I going to do? Then in that situation, Ibn Taymiyyah and other scholars, they said that, well, this is a pillar tawaf, then therefore do the pillar tawaf even if you're in a state of menstruation, because you cannot stay, one, you cannot stay without doing the pillar and completing the pillar, and two, and certainly because you're probably going to be paying extra money, you can't leave the whole basically team and the whole group behind, etc. So in that situation, do your pillar tawaf even though you had your period. Okay, so don't miss out on your pillar tawaf. Okay, so just to mention that one. And this is a very common thing that women do, and then they basically lose their umrah, lose their hajj. It's pretty simple. Do your sa'i, delay your tawaf. If you're capable of delaying your tawaf till you finish your period and everything's fine, yeah, then delay your tawaf till you're finished with your period to stay on the safe side. But no, I basically cannot not delay it and cannot do that because I would miss out on both my Hajj and also the team. So in that situation, we'll say, do your tawaf, even if you're in a state of menstruation. Okay. Let's say, of course, in general, when we're speaking about entering al-Kaaba itself, okay, enter al-Kaaba itself, we're just talking about in a state of menstruation, and we're speaking about that moment where the woman is menstruating. What should she do? Can she enter the Kaaba area, etc.? Differences of opinions between scholars. What about going for a rawda? What is a rawda? A rawda is in al-Madinah. Differences of opinions between scholars on whether that is permissible. In other words, going in that area and basically doing all those, I guess, all those visiting all those sites and all of that, that's permissible even if you have your period. But differences of opinions on whether you can go to al-Masjid al-Nabawi, and not only just al-Masjid al-Nabawi, but any masjid as well. Can you visit any of those masajid? Can you enter al-Kaaba? Can you enter the masjid? Well, in order to go to Rawda, but in order to go to Rawda, you really have to pass by al-Masjid. Okay, so can I do that as well? Differences of opinions between scholars on whether a person or a woman, not a person, but a woman during the state of her period, on whether she can stay in the masjid or not. So we're going to talk about that in just a bit. Okay, what's the evidence that a person in the state of a major impurity? Let's look at it. Okay. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى حتى تعلموا ما تقولون ولا جنبا إلا عابري سبيل حتى تغتسلوا. Okay. Let's see. Here's the ayah. It's basically saying if a person is in a state of a major impurity, that they cannot pray. O you who believe, do not approach prayer while you're intoxicated until you know what you're saying. Or in a state of janaba, which we talked about, said post-sexual excitement. We're speaking about the climax of it. Except those passing through a place, that is the place of prayer, until you have washed your whole body. So this is basically that ayah that's considered the key ayah for major impurity, in explaining that one to you. So you cannot enter the masjid while you're in a state of janaba unless you were passing by. So what does that mean, passing by? So if you're in, wait a minute, where's the masjid anyways? So in the US, a masjid usually has, a couple things. So there would be an area that's designated for prayer. Another area is probably for the classrooms. Another area is probably a basketball area. Another area, perhaps a pool table, whatever that they might have, probably in the masjid. Another area is probably for the bazaars that they would do and all of that. Then the area that is considered the designated space for salah, that would be the musalla area. That would be the place of prayer. Then therefore, the other space is not a musalla. So a woman during her state of period, all scholars would agree that she can enter the other premise, but not the area of masjid. The area of masjid, there are differences of opinions between scholars. So for let's say for the sisters, okay, for the sisters that are wanting to attend maybe a halaqah, maybe there was an event they were doing and they happen to be doing that event inside the masjid and not on the other premise, for example, then is it permissible to join in that? Differences of opinions between scholars. Why? Because they actually debated on the authenticity of the ahadith that prohibited women from entering, sorry, not praying, but sorry, from entering the masjid during the state of their menstruating state. There are differences of opinions on the authenticity of those ahadith. Okay, let's see. What else? The different things that are impermissible to do on a person in a state of a major impurity or ritual impurity. Let's see. Reading the Quran. What's the difference? Ali ibn Abi Talib narrated a hadith, لا يحجبه, that is the Prophet ﷺ, عن القرآن شيء ليس الجنابة. Okay. Quote. Wait a minute. What's the number one? Let's go over here. Narrated by Ahmad, Abu Dawud, At-Tirmidhi, An-Nasa'i, Ibn Majah. Okay. And يقرئنا القرآن ما لم يكن جنوبا. That the Prophet ﷺ would read the Quran unless he was in a state of impurity, which is impurity. We're speaking about janaba here. We talked about that earlier. Okay, let's see. What does that hadith say? So Ali ibn Abi Talib quote, he said, nothing prevented him, that is the Prophet ﷺ, from reciting the Quran than being in a state of janaba. Well, janaba is not major ritual impurity. I mean, it is, but that's not the translation. What makes janaba could be one, like we said, whether a wet dream, or two, reaching the climax of sexual excitement, whether it's for a female orgasm or a male ejaculation. Okay, so that would be in a state of janaba. And of course, penetration, even if that was partial. Okay, whether in a halal relationship or in a haram relationship. Okay, that would be in a state of janaba. Okay, let's continue. So the other hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ, the PBUH, that's basically a what do they call that? PBUH, peace be upon him. Okay, used to recite the Quran for us unless he was in a state of janaba. Okay, so he said this proves that it is prohibited for the person in a state of major ritual impurity to recite the Quran. The same ruling applies to both menstruating women and women in a state of postnatal bleeding. Yet some scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah maintain that it is permissible for menstruating women to recite the Quran for fear of forgetting it. Well, guess what? It's not just Ibn Taymiyyah, but you had a number of different other scholars that said that it was permissible too, like Ibn Hazm, like Ibn al-Athir, who was that other scholar? Abu Thawr as well, I believe, also mentioned the same thing. So we actually have a number of different scholars, al-Mizzi as well, Shafi'i. So let's look at those names. Al-Mizzi is Shafi'i. Well, why did I say Ibn al-Athir? I should have said al-Mizzi. Abu Thawr has his own madhab. Ibn Hazm is Zahiri, and Ibn Taymiyyah is, well, attributed to Hanbali. Okay, so now we see different scholars from different madhab really saying that is permissible. Okay, let's continue. So basically he wanted to, I guess, because it's a summarized book of fiqh, he just wanted to give you, I guess, let's say the summary of it, didn't want to let you go in all those differences of opinions and get lost. So he just basically got to what he considers as a preponderant and just laid it out like that. And he said, well, what that proves that it is impermissible to read the Quran in a state of janaba, which would include menstruating women. But you could see, he said, that there was an exception. Things, scholars like Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, that he considered that it was permissible in situations where that she would fear that she would forget it. Okay, and he said it is permissible that a person would say quotes from the Quran. So let's say, for example, Alhamdulillah. Can I say Alhamdulillah while I'm in a state of, let's say, janaba, or a state of period, even though the word Alhamdulillah is certainly a part of the Quran, or perhaps MashaAllah, it's part of the Quran. Just different quotes. Bismillah, I want to eat, and I said Bismillah. It's part of the Quran. Is that permissible? So the scholars that had said, or Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, etc. Let's say even the scholars that said it was haram for a woman, for example, or a man in a state of janaba, to read part or the whole Quran, they considered that such dhikr is permissible. Okay. So it would be permissible to, what's the evidence? That the Prophet ﷺ كان يذكر الله على كل أحيانه, that the Prophet ﷺ used to mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. Nothing specific. No certain time where it would prevent him from remembering or mentioning the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he said, وَيَحْرُمُ عَلى الْمُحْدِثِ حَدَثًا أَكْبَرَ مِنْ جَنَابَةٍ أَوْ حَيْضٍ أَوْ نِفَاسٍ اللُّبْثُ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ بِغَيْرِ وُضُوءٍ. Said it would be impermissible for a person in a state of a major impurity, to stay in the masjid. So what does that mean? That's a different topic right now? Yeah. So he's saying that a person in a state of major and minor impurity, they're not allowed to stay in the masjid, even if it's a woman that has her period or a woman postnatal bleeding, unless she makes wudu. So can they make wudu and just enter the masjid, or how does that go? First of all, what's the evidence? Let's see. The evidence is يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى حتى تعلموا ما تقولون ولا جنوبا إلا عابري سبيل حتى تغتسلوا. That's the evidence, the ayah. O you who believe, do not approach prayer while you're intoxicated, unless you know what you're saying, or in a state of janaba, except those passing through. So we're allowed to pass through the masjid. Okay? حتى تغتسلوا. So does that اغتسال actually mean that I take a shower? Or is that meaning that I can reduce the amount of impurity by making wudu? Here's another hadith. Let's look at it. لا أحل that's an ayah. This is a hadith. لا أحل المسجد لحائض ولا جنوب do not permit this masjid for a woman in state of janaba or in state of menstruation basically, or in a state of janaba, that it would basically not be permissible. Wait, so let's look at number 2. Okay, this hadith, what about it? So this hadith, you could see that it was narrated by Abu Dawood, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Majah, but guess what? This hadith is actually a place of dispute between scholars. What do you mean by a place of dispute? So we mean a place of debate on whether this is an authentic hadith or not. Why? Because some scholars actually said that there are certain narrators and they questioned certain narrators in the hadith. So what does that mean? Yeah, certainly some scholars actually said حتى تغتسلوا, that you would not be capable of approaching prayer or the place of prayer, so that you would be first capable of knowing what you're saying. Well, that's in regards to intoxication. But in regard to a person that's in a state of janaba, they could only pass by the masjid. So what does it mean to pass by the masjid? Like, let's say your son is in the masjid and you didn't give him a phone because you're a smart mom and you're a good parent. You definitely understand the dangers of giving a teenager or giving your son access to phones, and you're very mature parent, so you didn't give them those phones, and you basically wanted to sneak and check out on your child and see whether they're paying attention in their Quran class or not. So you basically go into their Quran class, and in order to do that, you would really have to pass by the masjid. But you have your period on that day. Is that permissible? Or you're probably in a state of janaba. Yes, it is permissible. Some scholars actually said, can you do wudu before entering the masjid? What do you mean, do wudu? She's on a state, she's actually having her period, so it doesn't really make a difference. Okay, anyways. So some scholars actually said, no, it just reduces the impurity, and basically considered that, taking it from the ayah, حَتَّى تَغْتَسِلُوا, that this isn't necessarily talking about only a shower, but this is also talking about making wudu. So if a person were to make wudu when they had a major impurity, some scholars actually said it would be permissible for a person to even sit in the masjid and stay in the masjid. Like, for example, probably listen to a halaqah. Okay, what's the evidence? So Ata ibn Abi Rabah, he said, I had seen men from the Prophet's companions, they would sit in the masjid even though they were in a state of janaba, if they were to pray, to make wudu, as if they were going to pray. And what is the whole wisdom behind all of that? Well, it's basically to just reduce the amount of the impurity there is. Okay, so can they just pass by and not necessarily just sit down? So just to pass by, maybe she's just gonna go to the office. And in order to go to the office, I don't know how their architecture was done, but in order to go to the office, that she has to pass by the masjid because the office is basically inside the masjid, for example. Well, that would be permissible because the quote says, إِلَّا عَابِرِي سَبِيلٍ, unless you were passing by. So if you're just passing by, even if you don't necessarily do wudu, okay, or take a shower, that yes, you can actually just pass by. Let's say, فيكون ذلك مخصصا لعموم لا يحل المسجد لحائض ولا جنوب. So you basically wanted to say, well, that's that exclusive hadith that basically gives them the permission to do so. Okay, well, wait a minute. What about Salat al-Eid? So during Salat al-Eid, the sunnah is that it wouldn't be in the masjid. That's a sunnah. So where, like, do it where? Well, a community center, the field, outside a field, somewhere that is open space, somewhere that basically is not the masjid, something that, an area that combines everybody. So can the women that are menstruating actually stay there or something? Yeah. Well, wait a minute. The Prophet ﷺ said, وَلْيَعْتَزِلِ الْحُيَّضِ الْمُصَلَّى, that these women should basically avoid, the menstruating women, avoid the area where everyone is praying. So, but it's not like the place is going to get contaminated. Yeah, it's just to give space for the people that are praying to basically be capable of making a congregation right there. Okay, so that's basically the whole idea. Okay, we have 15 minutes, so if there are any questions regarding what we had discussed, would be happy to answer them, inshallah. And let's see right there. For later, someone whose prayers are not accepted for 40 days and are asked or made to volunteer to lead prayer. Okay, so for a person whose prayer is not accepted for 40 days, like if they were, if let's say they went to a fortune teller or they had a drunk alcohol, it doesn't mean that they could stop prayer for 40 days. No, it's the barakah of their prayers. Those are what would be considered as they're missing out on it. All right, but they would still have to pray. Okay, even for 40 days, yes, they would have to still pray, even though that hadith said so. Okay, so this is basically to say the barakah of their prayer is basically going to be losing its effect. It's going to be losing basically the influence on them, the spirituality, etc., for 40 days. Is tawaf like salah? Tawaf is like salah, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had permitted that you are capable of talking within tawaf. So, yes. Did I answer the question? Okay. Any other questions? I'd be happy. Go ahead, Samira.
Yes, so I just want to clarify because it was something new for me. So what I'm understanding is that because there are so many differences of opinions and it's so vast, we are allowed, a person in a state of janabat is allowed to go through the masjid and be in the area except in the musalla.
Right. So this is the general thing, but unless they needed to pass by. So in general, yes, if they're in a state of janaba, do not go to the masjid and at least the musalla area.
Okay, and for women, it's the same, menstruating women, it's the same thing.
So for menstruating women, like I said, scholars debated whether she would be, in analogy, be taking the same ruling of a person in a state of janaba or not. They debated that piece of it, and they also debated whether she can enter the masjid, like listen to a halaqah, take a Quran class perhaps, or give a dars or something like that, or participate in the masjid, even though she's basically sure of not soiling the place. Okay, so that's that area of debate. The area of debate is, number one, is a woman during the state of menstruation, is she going to be considered as taking the same ruling as the person in state of janaba? Two, are those ahadith necessarily that prohibit women during the state of menstruation and prohibiting them from entering the masjid? Are those hadith authentic? That's a state of that's a place of debate. Number three, is this exclusive to the ritual impurity, or is this basically involving on whether you will soil the place or not? Okay, so that was, is it an issue of hygiene that we're just trying to keep the place clean? Or is this talking about something even more? Okay, so that's that area of debate. Let's see, a person whose prayer is not accepted for 40 days should decline to lead prayer. They don't necessarily have to decline to lead prayer. it's best if they were to put someone else to lead the prayer just to stay on the safe side. But they don't necessarily, in general, they don't necessarily have to decline. Okay. And they would have to do a lot of repentance. So the two times, whether it's drinking or whether it's going to a fortune teller, those are the two times where they're for 40 days their prayer is not valid. Okay. So it's best if that number one, the person is obligated to still pray, but then it's best if they were to put someone else to lead just to stay on the safe side and away from the differences of opinions between scholars. I hope I answered that one. So here's what we'll do. Oh, Samira, go ahead, dear.
Yes, so I had one more question with regards to you were explaining that the ayah that says that you unless you do wudu, you don't go through the masjid. Is that to say that someone in a state of janabat, if they do wudu, then they can go through the masjid?
So certainly, if a person was in a state of janaba and they did do wudu and they stayed to listen to a dars or they passed by the masjid, that is something that the Sahaba themselves had done. So yes, you could see that that's a valid opinion.
Okay, and one more question. Someone in a state of janabat is able to read the Quran by memory, or they can read it by picking it
Good
up?
question. Good girl. Good question. So we were generally talking about holding the actual Quran. Okay. And by memory, the debate is let's say less, and certainly by reading the Quran by memory, the debate is less because the person is not actually holding the Quran. And the reason for why that strictness, at least on holding the Quran, because they debated, or the debate went stronger when they discussed the ayah, la yamassuhu. So the word ilmas actually means to touch. So they debated strongly on this type of touching, whether it is permissible or not. Okay.
So we can read by memory.
We can read by memory, according to a number of different scholars. Yes.
Okay. Because I would not read Ayatul Kursi because I thought, if you're in a state of janabat, you're not supposed to read.
So, like I said, it is a considerable opinion that you can. Ibn Hazm, al-Mizzi, Abu Thawr, consider that it is permissible to read the Quran in a state of janaba. Specifically, Ibn Hazm, he was the most one famous for that. And he really, I would say ardently, as Ibn Hazm's always method, debate and advocate for that idea and for that ruling that it's permissible to read the Quran. In fact, he went as far as holding the Quran and reading directly from it. Okay. But even when we came to discussing reading it by memory, the debate even grew stronger. Because more opinions or more scholars also adhere to that opinion that you can hold the Quran, that you can read the Quran by memory.
Jazakallah khair. That was clarifying.
So this is it, inshallah, everybody. And we'll come back to discuss two more chapters. Number one, the adab of Qada al-Hajah. I did put forward on the group the syllabus. I also put the two books, the English copy and the Arabic copy, so you would find that. And next week, we'll be talking about the different etiquettes of entering the bathroom. And of course, what's haram and what's not haram, and doing siwak and khisal al-fitra. What is siwak? Well, siwak is basically, that stick that you would basically cleanse your teeth with. And khisal al-fitra, we're going to be talking about things like waxing, things like removing hair off the body, things like clipping the nails, etc. So stay tuned for that one. I think it involves a lot of things that women would like to know. So, inshallah, we'll see you all next week. Let me stop the recording and kind of, I guess, chill out with ourselves for a little bit.